In 1943, a farm wife in Barber County, Alabama, was already an hour into her morning before the sun cleared the tree line. The wood stove was lit. The animals had been checked. The bread was rising. She had not consulted a morning routine. She had not read a productivity book or listened to a podcast about habit stacking. She simply moved through the first hours of the day the way the farm required. In a sequence so practiced it had become indistinguishable from instinct. By the time her children sat down for breakfast, the most important work of the morning was already done. Science has spent 80 years building the vocabulary to describe what she already knew. These 20 habits are what she did before any of that vocabulary existed. Number 20. Lighting the stove before doing anything else. The first act of every farming morning was heat. Not comfort heat, functional heat. The stove that would cook breakfast, heat water, warm the kitchen for the children, and maintain the temperature required for rising bread had to be started first because everything else depended on it. A farm wife in 1943 understood sequencing the way a modern project manager charges consulting fees to explain. The thing that everything else needed had to come first, before the things that needed it were ready to need it. A 1941 home economics extension study across Alabama and Georgia found that farm wives who established fixed morning sequences anchored to the stove lighting completed morning household preparation an average of 34 minutes faster than those without fixed sequences. Research on task sequencing from the University of Michigan, published in 2018, found that beginning a complex multitask morning with the foundational enabling task, the one that unblocks all subsequent tasks, produces significantly lower cognitive load and higher completion rates than beginning with the most urgent or most visible task. Your grandmother lit the stove first. Everything else waited its turn. Number 19. Checking the animals before checking anything else. Before breakfast, before coffee, before the children were stirred, the animals were checked. Not fed necessarily, not worked. Checked. A walk through the barn or the yard to confirm that everything that had been alive the night before was still alive and well. A sick animal found at 5 a.m. could be treated. A sick animal found at noon might already be lost. A 1942 agricultural extension report from the University of Tennessee found that farmers who conducted daily pre-dawn animal checks reported 41% lower livestock mortality from treatable conditions than those who checked animals as part of a later morning routine. The habit was not sentiment. It was asset management. The livestock represented the farm's operating capital, and a man who did not check his capital before the day began was a man gambling with his family's survival. Research on proactive monitoring from Carnegie Mellon University has established that brief daily inspection routines for critical assets, whether livestock, machinery, or infrastructure, reduce failure rates and associated costs by a measurable margin that compounds significantly over time. Your grandfather walked the barn at dawn not because he loved the animals, because losing one was something he could not afford. Number 18. Listening to the weather before making any plan. A farmer in 1943 Iowa stepped outside every morning and read the sky before deciding what the day would hold. Wind direction, cloud formation. The particular quality of morning light that experienced farmers could interpret as reliably as any barometer. The day's work was not fixed in advance. It was determined by what the morning told him. A 1940 agricultural behavior study of Midwest grain farmers found that farmers who adjusted daily work plans based on morning weather observation made significantly more efficient use of favorable conditions and experienced fewer weather-related crop and equipment losses than those who followed fixed weekly work schedules regardless of conditions. Research on adaptive planning from the University of Nebraska's Agricultural Extension Program has found that the ability to read environmental conditions and adjust plans accordingly is the primary distinguishing characteristic between consistently profitable small farm operations and those that struggle, outperforming capitalization, acreage, and equipment quality as a predictor of farm viability. Your grandfather read the sky every morning. He was doing something that no weather app has ever fully replicated because no weather app knows your specific field. Number 17. Drinking something warm before physical work. Not coffee necessarily, though coffee was common where it could be afforded. Hot water. Warm broth left from the night before. Something warm in the stomach before the body was asked to work in cold air. A farm wife in Georgia in 1944 He did whatever was available and gave it to the workers before they went out, not as hospitality, as preparation. A 1941 occupational physiology study of agricultural workers in the American South found that workers who consumed warm liquid before cold weather morning labor reported significantly lower incidence of respiratory illness and muscle strain than those who began work without it. Research on thermal preparation and physical performance from the University of Birmingham, published in 2016, confirmed that warm liquid consumption before physical exertion in cold environments measurably improves circulation in peripheral muscle groups, reduces injury risk, and extends sustainable work duration. Your grandmother's warm broth before the morning work was not a recipe. It was physiology she had inherited from the generation before her. Number 16. Feeding the children before feeding the adults. In a farming household, the children ate first. Not because adults were less hungry, because children who needed to walk to school or complete morning chores before school could not wait while adults completed their own preparations. The sequencing was practical. The most time-constrained members of the household were served first so that their timeline could be met. A 1943 rural household management study found that farm families who fed children first reported significantly lower rates of school tardiness and morning household conflict than those who fed all household members simultaneously. Research on household sequencing and family stress from the University of Minnesota has found that serving the most time-constrained household members first is the single most effective structural change available to families seeking to reduce morning conflict. More effective than earlier waking times, more effective than preparation the night before, and more effective than any motivational intervention. Your grandmother served the children first because the school bell did not negotiate. She was running a household the way a logistics manager runs a supply chain. Number 15. Splitting the morning's wood the night before. The wood used in the morning was split the evening before, not the morning it was needed. The night before, stacked within reach of the door, dry and ready. A farmer who split his morning wood the night before never started a cold morning with an urgent task that required physical exertion before his body was ready for it. A 1938 farm efficiency study across rural Tennessee and Kentucky found that farmers who prepared morning fuel the previous evening began their days an average of 22 minutes earlier and reported significantly lower morning fatigue than those who split wood as part of their morning routine. The habit is a precise expression of what behavioral economists at Princeton call implementation planning. The research finding that completing preparatory actions the day before a task is needed reduces the cognitive and physical cost of beginning that task by removing the startup friction that causes delays and avoidance. Your grandfather split wood the night before, not because he was organized, because cold mornings and urgent physical tasks were a combination that cost time he did not have. Number 14. Eating something before leaving the farmyard. No one left the property without eating something. Not a full meal necessarily, but something. A piece of cornbread, a cup of milk, whatever was available. A farmer who left his property on an empty stomach to perform physical labor was a farmer whose judgment would deteriorate, whose energy would collapse, and whose morning would cost him more than it produced. A 1942 agricultural labor productivity study found that farm workers who ate before beginning field work sustained productive output through mid-morning at rates 28% higher than those who began work fasted on grounds of time or habit. Research from the University of Cardiff published in 2014 confirmed that even a small morning meal, as few as 200 calories consumed within 30 minutes of beginning physical work, measurably improves sustained attention, physical endurance, and decision quality through the first 4 hours of labor. Your grandmother did not let anyone leave without eating. That was not nurturing. That was workforce management. Here is where these habits stop being about farm logistics and start being about something that the farm produced in people that the office never has. Number 13. Starting the hardest physical task while the body was freshest. The heaviest work came first. Field clearing, fence post driving, barn repair. Whatever required the most physical output was scheduled for the first hours of the day when the body had recovered from sleep and had not yet accumulated the fatigue of the morning's lighter work. A 1940 agricultural labor study of Mississippi Delta cotton farmers found that workers who performed heavy physical labor in the first 2 hours of the workday completed those tasks 31% faster and reported significantly lower end-of-day physical complaints than those who saved heavy work for later in the morning. Research on physical fatigue, sequencing from the American College of Sports Medicine, has established that neuromuscular performance peaks in the first 90 minutes of physical activity following adequate rest, declining measurably thereafter. Scheduling the highest demand work within that window is the single most efficient use of a body's daily physical capacity. Your grandfather plowed first and mended fences second. He had discovered performance optimization through the logic of survival. Number 12. Walking the property boundary once a week. Always on the same morning. Every Monday morning, or every Sunday after church, or every first morning of the week, the farmer walked his boundary. Not to inspect it necessarily, though inspection happened. To maintain his relationship with the land he was responsible for. A fence post that had shifted. A drainage ditch that was beginning to block. A section of tree line that was encroaching on a field. Problems seen weekly were problems addressed before they became expensive. A 1937 Farm Management Extension Bulletin from Iowa State University found that farmers who conducted regular scheduled property walks reported 34% lower annual infrastructure repair costs than those who addressed property issues reactively. Research on proactive monitoring and asset management from MIT Sloan has established that scheduled regular inspection of critical infrastructure reduces total life cycle maintenance cost by an average of 40% compared to reactive maintenance. A finding so consistent across industries that it has become foundational in engineering management. Your grandfather walked his land every Monday morning. He was practicing predictive maintenance 80 years before the term existed. Number 11. Sharpening every blade used the previous day before beginning the new one. At the end of the day, the blades were checked. At the start of the next day, they were sharpened if needed. Your grandfather did not begin a morning's work with a dull tool. Not because he was particular about his equipment, but because a dull blade on a farm was not an inconvenience. It was a hazard. A blade that required more force produced less control, and less control on a farm produced injuries. A 1941 farm safety report from the National Safety Council found that tool and blade condition was a contributing factor in 43% of farm implement injuries recorded that year. The habit of morning blade maintenance eliminated an entire category of preventable accident before the workday began. Research on tool maintenance and occupational safety from the National Institute for Occupational Safety and Health has confirmed that pre-shift tool inspection and maintenance is among the most cost-effective safety interventions available to any manual labor operation, reducing injury rates by a documented 38% in operations where it is consistently practiced. Your grandfather sharpened his tools every morning. He was not being careful. He was being intelligent about the relationship between tool condition and personal safety. Number 10. Noting what the animals ate and how much. Your grandfather kept a rough mental log, or in some cases a written one, of what his animals had consumed and how they had behaved the previous day. Not formally, not in a spreadsheet. But the information was held and referenced every morning when the animals were checked. A cow that had eaten less yesterday was watched more carefully today. A hog that had drunk less water was checked for fever. The morning check without the previous day's baseline was observation without context, useful but less useful than observation compared against what you already knew. A 1943 veterinary extension bulletin from Purdue University found that farmers who tracked animal consumption patterns informally but consistently identified illness, an average of 2.3 days earlier than those who assessed animals without historical reference. Research on baseline monitoring and anomaly detection from Johns Hopkins Medical School, applied to patient monitoring but directly analogous, has established that the single most reliable early warning signal for health decline is deviation from individual baseline, not comparison to population average. Your grandfather knew what his animals usually ate. That knowledge saved animals and money every year. Number 9. Praying before the first tool was picked up. Before the work began, a moment. For most farming families in 1940s America, this was explicitly religious. A brief prayer before the day's labor, spoken aloud or silently, that acknowledged the uncertainty of the work ahead and the dependence of the outcome on forces beyond the farmer's control. It was also, functionally, a transition ritual, the signal that preparation had ended and work had begun, that the mind had shifted from the domestic world of the house to the productive world of the field. A 1942 community study of rural Georgia farming families found that households with consistent pre-work ritual practices, whether religious or secular, reported higher work satisfaction scores and lower midday motivational failure rates than those without. Research on pre-performance ritual from Dr. Allison Wood Brooks of Harvard Business School, published in Organizational Behavior and Human Decision Processes, found that brief pre-task rituals measurably reduce performance anxiety and improve task engagement, regardless of the content of the ritual. Your grandfather prayed before he picked up the plow. Science confirmed it was one of the most effective things he could have done. Number 8. Checking in with the neighboring farmer before beginning the day's work. A brief exchange at the fence line or across the road. What are you doing today? Anything you need? Anything I should know? In communities where farms were interdependent and labor was sometimes shared, this morning check-in was operational intelligence. If the neighbor was planning to burn a field today, your grandfather knew not to plant downwind. If the neighbor had seen a predator near his livestock, your grandfather checked his own. A 1939 cooperative farming study in rural Ohio found that farms with regular neighbor communication reported significantly fewer duplicated resource expenditures, better coordination of shared labor, and faster response to shared threats than those operating in isolation. Research on information sharing in interdependent systems from Stanford's Organizational Behavior Department has established that brief regular information exchanges between interdependent parties produces efficiency gains that formal coordination mechanisms cannot replicate, because informal daily exchange captures real-time operational information that scheduled meetings always miss. Your grandfather's morning conversation at the fence line was not socializing. It was a daily intelligence briefing. Number 7. Completing the first task entirely before moving to the second. A fence section was completed before the next section was started. A row was planted to its end before the next row was begun. Partial completion was not recognized as progress. Only full completion counted, and full completion was the only condition under which the next task could begin. This was not rigidity. It was the logic of physical work in which a half-repaired fence was no fence at all, and a half-planted row produced no crop. A 1940 agricultural efficiency study of Tennessee farm operations found that farmers who completed tasks sequentially to full completion produced 29% more total output per day than those who worked on multiple tasks simultaneously. Because partial completion of multiple tasks produced the psychological and logistical overhead of multiple open loops, without the functional benefit of any completed one. Research on task completion and cognitive load from Dr. Roy Baumeister of Florida State University has established that incomplete tasks consume working memory continuously until closed, a cognitive tax that compounds with every additional open task. Your grandfather finished the fence section before he started the next one. His mind was always working with a clean ledger. Number 6. Eating breakfast as a family. At the table, with no exceptions. The farming family sat down together for breakfast. Every morning. The work could wait 15 minutes. The field was not going anywhere. The table was where the day's work was loosely coordinated. Who was going where, what needed doing, what the children were responsible for after school. It was also the only moment of the day when all members of the household were in one place before the farm scattered them in different directions. A 1944 rural sociology study found that farming families who ate breakfast together reported significantly higher family coordination scores and lower rates of duplicated effort and missed tasks than those who ate individually before going to their respective work. Research from the University of Illinois on family meal communication has found that the informational function of shared meals, the coordination of schedules, responsibilities, and intentions that happens naturally in shared meal conversation, produces organizational benefits that no formal household management system has replicated as efficiently. Your grandmother held breakfast until everyone was at the table. She was running the morning meeting. Number 5. Leaving the house cleaner than they found it that morning. Before going to the field, your grandmother ensured the kitchen was in order. Dishes cleared, table wiped, fire banked or extinguished safely. She would return to this space at noon and again in the evening, and the condition in which she left it in the morning determined the condition in which she found it then. A disordered kitchen found at midday cost time she did not have. A 1941 home management study of rural Alabama farm wives found that women who completed kitchen order before leaving for morning fieldwork or domestic outdoor tasks reported significantly lower midday stress and faster meal preparation times than those who left morning disorder to be addressed at midday. Research on environmental order and executive function from Princeton University found that physical disorder in the environment continuously competes for neural attention, producing measurable cognitive load that degrades performance on subsequent tasks. Your grandmother left the kitchen clean before she went to the field. She was protecting her afternoon from her morning. Number 4. Observing without disturbing. Watching the land before working it. Before the first tool touched the ground, your grandfather often stood at the field edge and watched for a few minutes. Not planning exactly, observing what the light was doing to the soil surface, where the birds were feeding, whether the overnight dew had dried or was still present, whether the ground was ready to be worked or needed another hour. Experienced farmers understood that working soil at the wrong moisture level damaged its structure in ways that cost yield for years. A 1938 soil management bulletin from the University of Georgia found that farmers who assessed soil conditions before beginning tillage operations reported significantly higher soil structure quality scores over 5-year periods than those who began tillage according to fixed schedules. Research on observational decision-making from the field of ecological management has established that brief pre-intervention observation, assessing conditions before acting, produces better outcomes across virtually every domain where the intervention interacts with a complex living system. Your grandfather stood at the field edge and watched before he plowed. He was doing something that precision agriculture technology still struggles to replicate. Number 3. Singing or humming during repetitive morning work. The milking was done to song. The feeding was done to humming. Repetitive physical tasks that required the body but not the conscious mind were accompanied by music that the worker produced themselves. Not consumed, produced. It regulated pace, marked time, and occupied the portion of the mind that repetitive work left idle in a way that prevented the fatigue and attention drift that silence allowed. A 1940 industrial psychology study, extended to agricultural settings in a 1943 follow-up, found that workers who vocalized during repetitive tasks maintained consistent work pace 23% longer before experiencing attention deterioration than those who worked in silence. Research on music production and cognitive function from McGill University has established that self-generated vocalization during repetitive motor tasks activates the reward system and maintains dopamine levels in ways that external music consumption does not. Because the act of producing sound engages the motor system in coordination with the cognitive system, creating a form of dual-task engagement that prevents the monotony-induced attention collapse that repetitive work without vocalization produces. Your grandmother hummed while she milked. She was not being cheerful. She was managing her own attention. Number 2. Ending the morning work session at the same time every day. The morning's work stopped at a fixed time. Not when a task was finished, at the fixed hour, noon or 11:30, or whenever the household had established as the morning's end. The meal that followed, the brief rest, the afternoon's work, all of it depended on the morning ending when it was supposed to end, not when the work happened to reach a convenient stopping point. A 1942 farm labor management study found that farming operations with fixed work period boundaries reported higher afternoon productivity and lower worker fatigue scores than those with variable work periods determined by task completion. Research on time boundaries and cognitive recovery from the University of Toronto has established that fixed work period endings produce more complete psychological recovery during subsequent rest periods than open-ended work periods. Because the brain's recovery processes initiate more completely when the work period has a definite, rather than indefinite end. Your grandfather stopped at noon because noon was when he stopped. The afternoon was better for it. Number 1. Giving thanks for the morning before it became the afternoon. Somewhere between the morning's end and the midday meal, in the pause before sitting down, in the moment of washing hands at the pump, in the brief stillness before the food was touched, your grandfather or your grandmother acknowledged the morning that had passed. Not formally, not with words necessarily. A moment of recognition that the morning had happened, and they had been in it, and it had produced something. Gratitude in the farming tradition was not an emotion to be felt, but a practice to be observed. The daily acknowledgement that the crop, the animals, the weather, the health of the household were not guaranteed and had been given rather than earned. A 1939 rural community study in Mississippi found that farming families with consistent gratitude practices, however expressed, showed significantly lower rates of chronic despair during the Depression years than those without, independent of economic outcome. Dr. Robert Emmons of UC Davis, whose longitudinal research on gratitude remains among the most comprehensive ever conducted, found that the practice of gratitude acknowledgement produces a 25% increase in positive affect and measurable improvements in physical health outcomes, with effects most pronounced in populations experiencing sustained hardship. Your grandmother gave thanks before the afternoon began, not because things were going well, because giving thanks was what kept a person human when things were not. 20 habits. No optimization required, no biohacking, no morning routine influencer with a newsletter, just a farm wife in Alabama who was already an hour into her morning before the sun cleared the tree line, and who produced more genuine well-being before breakfast than most modern adults produce in a week of optimized routines. My challenge to you this week is simple. Before you check your phone tomorrow morning, do one thing the farm required. Light something, feed something, walk outside and read the sky. Then tell me in the comments, did anyone in your family farm? Because I guarantee someone in your bloodline knew every habit on this list. They never called it a morning routine. They called it getting the day started right.